Now, it has been said by my poor Arminian friends that some Christians will in fact lose their salvation. Saved to not saved. Forever. It's that simple. Naturally, bushy-browed Calvinists who love nothing more than to thrash free will theists will rush in with passages like John 10:28, John 6:37, Romans 8, arguing that God will certainly not lose even one of his sheep. No, not one. Undaunted by the challenge, the Arminian will grin a sly grin and unsheath passages like Colossians 1:22 and 23, Hebrews 6, Hebrews 10, and so on and so forth. You know them. Now, if you've ever been locked in one of these eternal struggles, you know that this back and forth will continue long into the night, world without end, proof text versus proof text. The conversation may or may not lead to fisticuffs, it just depends. Well, in full disclosure, I am one of those bushy-browed Calvinists, though I do pride myself in trimming things now and then, and I would like to help break this deadlock by presenting a particular line of argumentation that will hopefully cause my dear Arminian brothers to fall down in submission, filled with the joy of knowing that God is able to preserve his people from the very warnings posing a danger. Let's call it the Arminian Conundrum. Here's how it goes. We begin with a question. Do you think it's fair to say, based on 1 Timothy 2:4 and 2 Peter 3:9 passages you've already cited to me already, that God doesn't want to see any of his sheep perish? Or, to put it positively, that he wants all of his sheep to attain final salvation? Surely he does. Christians are especially precious in his sight. He doesn't want any of them to fall away and perish. Given this desire on God's part, let's conduct a thought experiment. Let's imagine that there's a Christian who is going to fall away 1 year from now. And it's going to be final. No repentance, no faith, true apostasy. Now, given God's desire to see this individual avoid damnation, could he alter the circumstances of the faltering Christian's life so as to keep him from falling away? Maybe a subtle change in the Christian's daily affairs could change the course of the future, kind of like those old Back to the Future movies. And since God would know exhaustively all the possible scenarios as well as their outcomes, he would know exactly what to do, right? Why are you giving me a funny look? I mean, really, surely the one who creates calamity or stills it could do this, right? Surely the one who directs the steps of men or steers the hearts of kings, the one who controls kingdoms and hardens or softens hearts, determines ailments, or controls whole swaths of history, even down to the sinful actions of men, could orchestrate the circumstances of this faltering Christian's life so as to keep him from falling away. Surely he could do it. But before you reply, as I can tell you have much you want to say, let's focus on one particular, just one little action. Could God, who desires to see this Christian attain final salvation, remove the saint via death at some point before the apostasy occurs, thus sparing him eternal condemnation? It's at least possible, right? Do you agree at least that God could do it? Interestingly, 1 Corinthians 11:32 supports this very idea. Due to their partaking of the Lord's Supper in an unworthy manner, some of the Corinthians died so that they, quote, wouldn't be condemned with the world. In other words, there have been people who have died due to God's chastening, but in this instance, it's a gracious chastening because it's meant to keep them from being condemned along with the world. This is important. Why? Because God has set a precedent. He can and has gone to great lengths to preserve his sheep. One might even say radical lengths. Now this is instructive. It's instructive because if God has the desire to save his people, and he says he has the power and the capability to save his people, and intends to save his people, and has specifically planned to save his people, and has intervened to keep his people, then this means that all Christians could be finally saved according to this idea of gracious death. Not one Christian would ever be lost, because for those Christians who might wander or astray, God could intervene and keep them from perishing, even if it means enacting death before the act of apostasy. It's possible, right? Now, if someone argues that 1 Corinthians 11:32 is an exception and not a rule, or that God will not or does not have to always act in this manner, then something very peculiar emerges. They're admitting that God has a reason for not acting the same way with all Christians when it comes to their final destiny. And if that's the case, then they're admitting that the phrase "he wishes none to perish" is qualified by another plan or desire in the designs of God. But wait a minute. Are you really going to qualify the phrase "he wishes none to perish" with other divine intentions or desires? If so, and surely you must, then the statement "he wishes none to perish" is not an absolute statement irrespective of other divine intentions. Well, this places you on very dangerous ground, Mr. Arminian, doesn't it? Smell that? It smells a lot like Calvinism so far as how we understand unconditional election and God's desire for all to be saved. This is two wills thinking, and so far as I'm aware, this is anathema to Arminians. But what's the alternative? There really isn't one. The choice is twofold. You either A, affirm that all Christians will be finally saved because God can and will keep them because he doesn't want any of his sheep to perish. Or B, affirm that God has a reason or reasons for allowing some Christians to finally perish even though he wishes none to perish and could do something about it. Option A is the Calvinist view, and option B forces you to say that God is capricious or arbitrary, the very thing you level against us Calvinists, which isn't true, of course. But what it does do is force you to think about the complexities of God, how there might be, as it has sometimes been called, two wills in God. So that's a conundrum, my friends. You can either become a Calvinist, oh mommy, or make distinctions like a Calvinist, which we know you can't do that. Never do that. So my advice would be to do both. To be a Calvinist who makes distinctions like a Calvinist.